Welcome to Bible Stories for Sleep. Remain with this story as it unfolds softly, each moment inviting deeper rest. Long ago, in the quiet hills of Israel, the sun began to rise softly over the land, painting the sky with gentle shades of pink and gold. In this peaceful morning, the prophet Elijah walked slowly, his thoughts deep with the work of God and the life he had led among the people. His steps were calm and measured, each footfall on the soft earth a reminder of the long path he had followed in service to the Lord. There was a stillness in the air that seemed almost sacred, as if the wind itself carried whispers of divine presence. Birds moved quietly among the olive trees, and the small rustle of leaves harmonized with the gentle murmur of a nearby stream. Elijah had served the Lord faithfully for many years, guiding the people with wisdom, speaking boldly when there was need, yet always moving with humility. In his heart, he carried the knowledge that the work of God was greater than any one person, and that the strength to carry on would not rest in him forever. In this calm, he felt a gentle awareness that the time had come to pass his mantle to another, not with grandeur or fanfare, but with quiet reverence and trust in God's unseen hand. Far below on the path, Elisha walked behind Elijah, watching him with wide, attentive eyes. Elisha had grown up near the small towns and fields of Israel, and he had known the prophet for some time, learning through silent observation and shared work how deeply the Lord's care extended into every corner of life. Elisha's heart was full of devotion, and he carried a quiet yearning to serve God in the same gentle and steadfast way that Elijah did. There was no boastfulness in his desire, only a soft longing to continue the work that had been entrusted to the prophet, to move quietly and faithfully, helping wherever there was need and bringing hope where shadows lingered. The two men walked together toward the Jordan River, the water glistening in the morning light as it flowed slowly and calmly along its banks. The river was peaceful and serene, reflecting the sky above like a mirror, and the sound of its gentle current filled the air with a quiet rhythm that seemed to match the beating of hearts devoted to God's work. Elijah stopped by the edge of the water, turning slightly to Elisha, who felt a soft wave of anticipation and awe. There was no sudden announcement, no loud proclamation, only the quiet, steady presence of a man who had lived fully in the service of God. Elijah reached for the mantle that had long been his symbol of calling and obedience, the simple garment of cloth that had rested upon his shoulders through years of wandering, teaching, and guiding. He held it carefully in his hands, not as a decoration, but as a token of responsibility and sacred duty. The mantle had been witness to many moments of quiet courage, many acts of unseen faith, and now it was about to pass to another who would carry forward the work with the same gentle devotion. With a steady and deliberate motion, Elijah laid the mantle upon Elisha's shoulders. There was no noise, no flourish, only the soft weight of the cloth resting against him, a quiet reminder of the path that lay ahead. Elisha felt a warmth that was not from the sun, a deep sense of presence and guidance that seemed to fill him from within. The mantle was more than a garment. It was a gentle assurance that the work of God moved on, even when it was unseen, even when it passed through ordinary hands. It was a quiet continuity, a sacred trust, and in that moment the river and the hills themselves seemed to hold their breath in reverence. Elisha bowed his head slightly under the weight of the mantle, feeling both the honor and the responsibility that it represented. There was no rush, no urgency, only a calm acceptance of the journey that had been quietly set before him. The river reflected the morning sun, and in its gentle flow, the young prophet saw a reminder that God's work continued steadily, quietly shaping the world without the need for spectacle or acclaim. The hills around them, the rustling leaves, and the soft chirping of the birds all seemed to echo the same message. That strength often comes in quiet ways, and continuity is most profound when it is hidden, unannounced, and fully trusted to God. As Elijah stepped back, letting Elisha carry the mantle forward, the air felt filled with a soft, unseen blessing. There was a calm joy in the exchange, a peaceful acknowledgment that one life had prepared the way for another. The sun rose higher, touching the fields and trees with its gentle light, and the quiet river continued its flow without interruption. Elisha stood there for a moment, letting the stillness surround him, feeling the presence of God like a gentle breeze, reminding him that even in unseen ways, miracles were at work, guiding, protecting, and sustaining those who trusted fully. The morning light grew warmer as Elisha stepped closer to the flowing waters of the Jordan. The river moved slowly, its surface shimmering like liquid glass under the soft glow of the sun. Each ripple carried the sound of quiet life, the gentle rustle of reeds along the bank, and the distant song of birds resting among the trees. The air was fresh with the scent of damp earth and wildflowers, and a sense of calm settled deeply in the heart, as if the land itself was holding a gentle breath in anticipation. Elisha looked upon the river with steady eyes. Its waters seemed ordinary, yet he sensed something sacred in the quiet rhythm of the current. The Jordan had been a place of crossings, of moments when faith moved gently but powerfully, unseen by many, yet undeniable to those who trusted fully. Today, it would hold another moment of that quiet wonder. He stepped closer, feeling the soft soil under his feet, and the cool touch of the morning breeze against his skin reminded him of the presence of God that had always guided him, like a quiet stream flowing beside his soul. Elijah stood near the edge, his figure calm and steady. There was no hurried gesture, no loud announcement of what was about to happen. He raised his hand gently, as if acknowledging the river and the world around them, and then lowered it toward the water. The river did not roar or tremble. It remained still and serene, as if waiting for a soft invitation to reveal its hidden power. In this peaceful hush, Elisha could feel the faith that had been carried silently from one prophet to another, resting now upon him and guiding his every thought and movement. As Elijah spoke words of quiet assurance, the waters along the banks began to shift ever so slightly. The current seemed to pause, holding its flow in perfect stillness, as though it too understood the sacredness of the moment. Elisha's eyes widened with gentle awe, not from surprise or fear, but from the quiet recognition that God's power often worked in ways that were subtle, yet profoundly complete. The river was calm and obedient, waiting for the faith of those who trusted, moving in harmony with the unseen hand that guided it. Step by step, Elisha moved closer to the water, feeling the smooth stones beneath his feet. He followed Elijah without hesitation, his heart steady, knowing that the river, though ordinary in appearance, would yield to the quiet faith that had been passed to him. The sunlight danced on the surface of the water, creating patterns of gold and silver that rippled softly across the river's gentle expanse. The reeds swayed lightly in the breeze, and the air carried the faint whisper of trees and birds, a soft chorus that seemed to honor the moment in hushed celebration. Then, as if responding to the quiet trust that filled the space, the waters began to part, not with sudden force, but with gentle movement. A path appeared, calm and smooth, dividing the river into two walls that glimmered in the morning light. The current itself did not roar or crash, but flowed softly on either side, leaving a clear passage in the center. Elisha felt the unseen faith lift within him, a quiet strength that had no need for spectacle. He placed one foot carefully onto the riverbed, feeling the cool, clear water surrounding him, yet parting enough to allow steady steps across. Elijah followed slowly behind, their footsteps echoing softly against the riverbed, a gentle rhythm in perfect harmony with the quiet world around them. Each movement was deliberate and unhurried, a tender reminder that faith and trust need no rush or urgency. The river, obedient to the hand of God, guided them steadily across, its surface smooth and glimmering like a mirror reflecting the sky above. Tiny ripples formed only where their feet touched the stones, leaving trails of movement that disappeared almost immediately, as if the river itself preferred the silence of the moment. The journey across the Jordan seemed timeless. The soft murmur of water, the faint rustle of reeds, and the distant calls of birds blended into a gentle symphony that wrapped around the two prophets. There was a sense of quiet witness in every detail, the sunlight, the stones, the slow flow of water, all acknowledging the subtle wonder of God's presence. Elisha felt a deep calm settle over him, a reassurance that even when the work of the Lord was unseen or unnoticed by the world, it moved faithfully and powerfully, guiding those who trusted to the other side of every challenge and crossing. As their feet touched the far bank, the waters slowly returned to their gentle current, flowing as they had always done, serene and unchanged, yet marked by the quiet faith that had passed through them. Elisha stood for a moment, breathing in the soft air, listening to the peaceful sounds of the river and the land. The path they had walked was gone, yet its memory lingered in the heart, a gentle reminder that God's work often unfolds in ways too subtle to see, but deeply real and lasting for those who walk in trust. The two prophets continued a few steps further along the river bank, the mantle resting lightly upon Elisha's shoulders, its presence a constant and silent guide. The land around them remained calm, the trees and beyond the Jordan, the hills of Jericho rose softly, their slopes bathed in gentle morning light. The town lay quiet in its small valley, with stone houses clustered together, their rooftops warm under the sun. A narrow path led toward the spring that gave life to the community, yet the water there was troubled and bitter, its taste sour and unkind to those who depended on it. Children had learned to avoid it, and even the animals seemed to drink only reluctantly, leaving a soft stillness around the pools that marked the spring. Elisha walked along the path, the mantle resting lightly upon his shoulders, a quiet weight of responsibility that he carried with care. He paused at the spring and knelt beside the troubled water. The surface shimmered dimly, reflecting the brightening sky above, yet its flow was uneven, murky in places, carrying a subtle reminder of the struggles of the people who drew from it. The prophet observed the water with soft eyes, aware that the remedy would not be loud or dramatic but gentle, flowing through simple obedience and quiet trust in God's guidance. Nearby, the townspeople went about their day slowly, tending to small gardens, feeding goats, and walking carefully along the stone paths. They noticed Elisha at the spring, but there was no crowding or commotion. Their presence was calm, respectful, and patient, allowing the work about to unfold to remain undisturbed. The prophet's movements were deliberate and serene as he gathered a small handful of fresh salt, a humble element of the earth, and held it carefully over the water. The gesture was quiet and almost ordinary, yet it carried within it a profound faith in the power of God to heal what was broken and restore what had become bitter. With gentle hands, Elisha cast the salt into the spring. The water, still and hesitant, seemed to respond softly, as though sensing the quiet authority of God flowing through this simple act. He knelt beside the edge, watching the gentle ripple spread outward, carrying a subtle shift in its taste and touch. The once bitter waters began to clear, moving with a smooth, untroubled current. The murky patches dissolved into calm clarity, leaving the spring pure and steady once more. Each wave shimmered with soft light, reflecting the sky and surrounding hills, a quiet celebration of healing that passed without fanfare or loud acclaim. Elisha rose slowly, letting the mantle settle against his back, and took a few careful steps along the banks of the spring. The air carried the faint fragrance of wildflowers and clean water, a gentle reminder that life thrives when care and attention are given, even in small, unseen acts. The people of Jericho began to approach quietly, drawing their water with soft gratitude, tasting the difference without need for words. There were no loud celebrations, only calm acknowledgment of the change, as if their hearts had been quietly lifted by the same unseen hand that moved the waters. The prophet lingered for a moment, letting the stillness of the spring and the soft rhythm of the flowing water sink deeply into his awareness. The gentle sounds of the town mingled with the murmur of the spring, the rustling of leaves, and the distant call of birds perched on stone walls and olive branches. In this serene harmony, it was easy to sense the quiet but powerful presence of God, moving through simple obedience and subtle acts to bring life where it had grown difficult, restoring peace without needing recognition. Elisha knelt once more at the water's edge, tracing his fingers lightly across the smooth surface, watching the ripples fade into gentle undulations. He thought of the people who would continue their daily tasks, drawing from the spring and sharing its water with their homes, their families, and their animals. Each sip would carry with it the quiet reminder of God's care, a blessing woven into the ordinary flow of life, unnoticed by many yet profoundly present. The light shifted softly across the hills, casting warm shadows that stretched toward the town and back again. Children moved quietly to the spring, their curiosity gentle and careful, testing the water and smiling at its sweetness. Animals drank calmly, their movements slow and peaceful, and the entire spring seemed to exhale, releasing the tension it had carried for so long. In every ripple and reflection there was a sense of completeness, a quiet satisfaction that comes when what was once troubled becomes restored through trust, patience, and unseen guidance. Elisha stepped back from the spring and took a moment to look across the town. The people continued their work, moving softly through the streets, tending to gardens and animals, carrying on with the rhythm of daily life now accompanied by the gift of clean water. The hills and the sky held their calm together, embracing the restored spring in a gentle quiet that seemed almost like a lullaby for the land. There was no hurry, no need to announce the miracle. The healing was complete, subtle in its unfolding, and powerful in its silent effect on the lives around it. He walked slowly along the bank, the mantle resting lightly against his shoulders, and listened to the soft sounds of flowing water, birdsong, and the quiet activity of the town. The entire place seemed to hum with gentle life, a reminder that God's care often moves in ways that cannot always be seen, yet reaches far and deep, touching hearts, restoring hope, and bringing peace to communities through acts of simple, faithful obedience. The sun rose higher, casting a warm glow. Elisha continued along the dusty path beyond Jericho, the morning sun warming the stones beneath his feet. The land was quiet and still, with gentle winds stirring the olive trees and carrying the faint scent of blooming wildflowers. In a small village ahead, the soft murmur of daily life moved slowly through narrow streets. People tended to their homes and animals with calm, careful movements. Among them lived a widow, whose days had grown heavy with worry. Her home was simple, and her stores of oil and grain had dwindled, leaving a quiet emptiness that seemed to stretch into every corner. The widow carried herself with quiet dignity, though her heart was weighed down by the uncertainty of what the day might bring. Each morning she checked her small jars of oil, noticing how little remained, and each evening she prepared simple meals for herself and her children, careful to measure every drop so it might last. Life had grown measured and cautious, a gentle rhythm shaped by necessity and need. Yet beneath her quiet concern, a soft hope lingered, fragile but persistent, like the distant sunlight brushing the tops of the hills. Elisha arrived at her home and knocked gently on the door. The widow opened it with a mixture of surprise and respect, seeing the prophet standing before her, calm and steady in his presence. He spoke softly, asking her to gather all the empty vessels she could find, from the smallest cups to the larger jars tucked away in corners. She moved slowly through her home, collecting them one by one, wondering how so many empty vessels could serve any purpose. Yet she followed the request without hesitation, guided by the gentle authority in his voice and the quiet certainty in his eyes. The prophet instructed her to pour the little oil she had remaining into the first jar. The widow obeyed, watching the amber liquid fill the vessel with careful attention. Elisha's voice remained calm, and even as he spoke of God's promise, that the oil would not run dry until every jar was filled. She poured steadily, her hands trembling only slightly, and as she moved from jar to jar, the oil seemed to continue flowing without end. Each vessel, empty moments before, held steadily more than she could have imagined. The quiet room was filled with a soft rhythm, the gentle sound of pouring blending with the whispers of wind through the open window. Light from the sun spilled across the jars, illuminating the golden oil as it moved slowly and steadily, filling every container placed before it. There was no rush, no loud proclamation, only the gentle multiplication of what had seemed too little to matter, a patient and unseen mercy that transformed scarcity into abundance. Her heart softened with calm wonder, and a quiet sense of relief settled over her home. The children watched from a corner, their eyes wide with curiosity and trust, feeling the gentle presence of something greater moving silently through the ordinary day. The oil continued to flow steadily, a reminder that provision comes not always through dramatic acts, but through faith, patience, and the quiet obedience of those who trust in God's care. By the time the last jar was filled, the widow felt a profound sense of peace. What had begun as emptiness had become plenty, and the quiet miracle left no noise but a gentle assurance that God's care could reach every small need, filling it completely. The room glowed softly in the warm light, the jars standing orderly on the floor, each one a testament to the calm, steadfast mercy that works quietly in every life that opens itself to trust. Elisha smiled softly, his presence gentle and unassuming, and stepped back, letting the stillness of the room settle. The widow moved among the jars, feeling a serene gratitude, and the air seemed to carry the quiet hum of life renewed. Outside, the sun climbed higher, touching the walls and paths with its warm glow, while the trees swayed softly and the wind whispered across the fields. In the hush of that day, the steady drip of unseen blessing filled the home completely, leaving a calm assurance that even in the simplest moments, God's mercy flows gently and abundantly. In a quiet village nestled among gentle hills, there lived a woman from Shunem who carried a heart full of thoughtful care. Her days moved slowly and deliberately, attending to her home, the small garden that stretched behind it, and the animals that wandered softly through the yard. She noticed the needs of those around her with quiet attention, her eyes always gentle, her hands ready to help in small but meaningful ways. In the peaceful rhythm of her life, she saw a way to serve God through kindness, offering hospitality not with grandeur, but with simplicity and sincerity. The woman spoke often with her husband about the prophet who visited their village, a man of calm presence and steady faith. He moved among the people quietly, speaking words that carried the wisdom of God and guiding hearts toward trust and hope. She considered the comfort it might bring to provide a place for him to rest, a space where he could find peace after his journeys and work among the people. In her mind, the image of a small, prepared room took shape, and she moved gently through her home, attending to its details with care and quiet delight. A corner of the house, overlooking the garden where sunlight danced across the olive trees, became the focus of her attention. She swept the floor carefully, letting the soft dust settle in the corners before brushing it away completely. Curtains of simple cloth were drawn aside to let in the warm light, and a small wooden bed was placed with its head near the window, where the morning air could enter gently, carrying with it the scent of flowers and herbs from the garden. The linens were folded with calm precision, each layer smooth and welcoming, a quiet invitation to rest and renewal. She added a few touches that seemed almost ordinary, yet carried deep thought. A small table stood nearby, ready for water or bread if the prophet desired, and a lamp of olive oil was placed gently to one side, its wick trimmed and ready to offer a soft, warm glow in the quiet evenings. Every choice was made with care, every movement gentle, creating a sense of peace that seemed to settle over the room as though it were part of the air itself. Even the placement of a simple stool by the window reflected a thoughtfulness that spoke of welcome and stillness. When the prophet arrived, the woman greeted him with a calm smile, her voice soft and steady, inviting him into the space she had prepared. There was no need for words of ceremony, no expectation of praise or reward, only the quiet joy of providing comfort and rest. The prophet entered the room and paused for a moment, sensing the gentle care woven into every detail, the presence of God in the simple acts of attention and hospitality. The light from the window and the soft fragrance of herbs combined to create an atmosphere of quiet serenity, a refuge from the busyness and cares of the day. He rested in the room, sitting lightly on the edge of the bed, feeling the softness of the linens and the calm that filled the space. The room seemed to breathe with him, the faint sounds of the garden outside, the wind through the olive branches, the distant calls of birds, and the gentle rustle of leaves, blending seamlessly with the quiet rhythm of his own heart. The Shunammite woman moved softly, attending to small needs without disruption, a gentle presence that reminded him that kindness and care could be as powerful and sacred as prayer. The day passed quietly, with sunlight moving slowly across the floor and walls. Shadows shifted gently, marking the hours without hurry, and the soft ticking of the village beyond created a calm backdrop for the serene space. Every detail of the room, from the placement of a pillow to the gentle sway of a small hanging curtain, reflected the care of a heart attuned to God's guidance and the simple joy of service. The air carried a sense of completeness, a calm that seemed to settle not only on the prophet but throughout the home, touching every corner with quiet blessing. The Shunammite woman stood for a moment by the window, looking out over her garden. The sun's warm light touched the flowers and herbs, and a soft breeze carried the delicate scent of earth and bloom into the room. She felt a gentle assurance that in offering this small space of comfort, she had invited God's presence in a quiet, unassuming way, allowing the sacred to dwell amidst ordinary life. Each act of preparation, each careful choice, had become more than hospitality. It had become a channel of peace, steady and gentle, flowing into the life of another, quietly and completely. Some time later, in the quiet of the Shunammite home, a stillness settled over the upper room where her young son slept. The morning light filtered gently through the small window, touching the walls with soft warmth. The child lay in calm repose, yet a subtle weight had settled upon the room, a quiet tension that seemed to press softly into the heart of the home. The mother moved beside him with gentle steps, her hands brushing lightly over the small shoulders of her sleeping boy, her voice a soft murmur of prayer, steady and calm, carrying trust rather than fear. She spoke quietly to God, her words gentle, not hurried, each one a soft thread of faith woven through the stillness of the room. Her heart was open, attentive, and patient, fully aware that the work of God moves often in silence, unseen and delicate. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, the soft rustling of leaves blending with the faint hum of distant birds, wrapping the house in a calm, steady embrace. The world seemed to pause in gentle reverence, allowing the quiet power of prayer and trust to flow unbroken. Elisha arrived at the home with measured steps, the mantle resting lightly upon his shoulders. He entered the upper room with calm assurance, moving slowly so as not to disturb the fragile balance of stillness. His eyes took in the small child, the mother's gentle presence, and the serene atmosphere she had created through quiet care and watchful patience. He knelt beside the bed, placing his hand softly upon the boy, feeling the warmth of life that had once flowed freely and now seemed barely held. The prophet spoke softly, words of gentle authority and calm faith, inviting the unseen presence of God into the space. His voice carried no urgency, only a steady certainty that what was needed would unfold through quiet obedience and trust. The mother stood close by, her hands clasped lightly, her breathing even and gentle, her heart open to the subtle, tender workings of divine power. There was no noise, no rush, only the hush of a room filled with expectation and care. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the child stirred. His small chest rose and fell with easier rhythm, and a faint warmth returned to his skin. The soft, steady flow of life moved gently, quietly, filling the room with a presence that seemed to glow from within. Elisha remained calm, his hand lightly resting upon the boy, guiding the quiet restoration with trust rather than force. The mother's eyes shimmered softly, reflecting the deep, serene awareness that God's power often moves silently, restoring what seems lost without commotion or spectacle. The upper room remained hushed, filled with the gentle hum of renewed life. The boy opened his eyes slowly, blinking into the soft light, and the mother leaned closer, her voice a quiet song of gratitude. Outside, the trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the distant murmurs of the village continued softly, undisturbed by the quiet miracle that had unfolded within. Life returned gently, tenderly, through prayer, stillness, and the unseen presence of God, moving in a calm and perfect rhythm that touched every corner of the room. Some time later, in the quiet of a small household, a simple pot rested over a gentle fire. The aroma of the stew that had been prepared drifted softly through the kitchen, warm and inviting, yet beneath its ordinary appearance lay a hidden danger. A small mistake in the preparation had left the mixture harmful, though no one could see it. The air remained calm, and the household moved in its usual rhythm, unaware of the threat lingering quietly in the pot. Elisha entered the home, his steps measured and calm, the mantle resting lightly upon his shoulders. The family greeted him with quiet respect, carrying on with their simple chores, their hearts steady in the presence of someone devoted to God's guidance. He looked upon the stew, sensing the subtle peril that could not yet be detected by ordinary eyes. The danger was hidden, silent, but his trust in God allowed him to act with gentle certainty. He instructed the vessels of the pot to be carefully removed from the fire, his voice soft and deliberate. The family watched attentively, their movements slow and mindful, responding with calm obedience. Elisha took a handful of flour, simple and unassuming, and added it to the stew. The powder fell quietly, settling into the simmering mixture. The change was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it carried a profound transformation, guided not by noise or rush, but by the steady, quiet hand of divine care. The aroma of the stew shifted gently, its bitterness and hidden harm fading into the warmth and nourishment it was meant to provide. The liquid moved smoothly, each stir guided with calm attention, transforming what could have caused harm into something safe, sustaining, and whole. The family observed in quiet amazement, sensing the unseen hand that had worked gently to restore balance and bring safety where danger had quietly lingered. Outside, the wind rustled softly through the trees, and the sun filtered through the window in slow, golden beams. The ordinary sounds of the household, footsteps, quiet murmurs, the soft clatter of dishes, blended seamlessly with the calm transformation taking place within the pot. The air itself seemed to hum gently with reassurance, a soft reminder that even unseen threats can be made safe through faith and careful attention. Elisha remained beside the pot, his movements deliberate and measured, allowing the quiet miracle to unfold fully. Each addition, each gentle stir, carried the assurance of God's guidance, moving calmly and unseen yet profoundly effective. The danger, though once hidden, had been neutralized, leaving the stew warm, nourishing, and ready to sustain the family as it should. The household resumed its peaceful rhythm, carrying on with the quiet tasks of the day. The pot, once a source of unseen harm, now reflected calm and safety, its transformation complete through simple, patient trust. In the hush of the kitchen, the gentle presence of God was felt in every movement, in every breath, bringing assurance that even hidden perils are met with care, and that peace can quietly follow where danger once lingered. The day continued with a gentle flow, and soon a small gathering formed near Elisha, people drawn together by quiet need rather than expectation. Hunger had settled softly among them, not as a sudden crisis, but as a familiar companion that followed the rhythm of daily life. Their faces showed patience more than urgency, and their movements were unhurried, shaped by long days of working the land and trusting that provision would come in its time. A man approached carrying a modest offering, 20 small loaves of barley bread wrapped carefully in cloth, along with a few heads of fresh grain. It was not much, barely enough for a handful of people, yet it was brought freely and without display. Elisha received it calmly, his expression steady and thoughtful. He looked upon the bread not with concern for its size, but with quiet trust in the God who provides beyond what the eye can measure. The loaves were placed gently before him, their coarse texture and earthy scent filling the air. Around them, the people waited in stillness, seated upon the ground or standing quietly nearby. There was no pressing forward, no anxious murmuring, only the soft sounds of the countryside and the low murmur of breath and movement. The moment felt unremarkable to an outside eye, yet it carried a quiet weight, as though something unseen was already at work. Elisha spoke with calm assurance, instructing that the bread be shared among the people. The words were simple, without emphasis or ceremony. Those assisting him hesitated for only a brief moment, aware of how small the offering seemed. Yet they obeyed, breaking the loaves carefully, passing the pieces from hand to hand. Each motion was gentle, each exchange unhurried, as though time itself had slowed to match the quiet trust guiding their actions. As the bread was distributed, something subtle unfolded. The pieces did not diminish as expected. Hands reached again, and there was always more to pass along. The barley bread remained warm and sustaining, its presence steady and sufficient. The people ate slowly, gratefully, their hunger easing without surprise or celebration. Conversation remained soft, faces relaxed, and the simple act of eating became a shared moment of calm fulfillment. The fresh grain was shared as well, its crisp texture and mild sweetness adding to the nourishment. Each person received enough, not in excess, but in quiet completeness. No one hurried, no one grasped for more than needed. The abundance revealed itself gently, woven into the ordinary act of sharing food. It was not announced, not marked by raised voices or astonishment. It simply continued, steady and faithful, until every person had eaten. When the last of the hunger had been satisfied, there was still bread remaining. The pieces were gathered carefully, placed together without comment. The presence of what remained spoke softly of provision that exceeds need, of care that reaches further than expectation. The people rose slowly, their strength restored, their spirits settled into a deeper calm. Gratitude moved among them quietly, carried in softened eyes and peaceful expressions rather than words. Elisha observed the scene with gentle attentiveness. His role remained unobtrusive, his trust unwavering. The miracle had unfolded without interruption to the natural flow of the day. The fields remained still, the sky unchanged, and the sounds of life continued as they always had. Yet beneath it all, a quiet abundance had moved through the gathering, touching each person without drawing attention to itself. The people dispersed gradually, returning to their tasks with renewed steadiness. The simple bread, once too little to consider, had become enough for many through quiet obedience and trust. In the calm that followed, the air held a sense of gentle completeness. God's provision had worked silently in the background of daily hunger, filling empty places without noise, without applause, and without leaving the ordinary path of life. Not long after, word travelled quietly across distant lands, carried not by celebration but by concern. A man of great authority named Naaman made his way toward Israel, his journey marked not by triumph but by an unspoken burden. Though respected and strong, he carried an illness that could not be hidden, a condition that followed him in silence. Beneath his fine garments and composed presence was a longing for healing, steady and unresolved, moving with him through each measured step of the road. Naaman arrived with companions and gifts, expecting that healing would come through visible acts of importance. He approached the place where Elisha lived, his posture upright, his expectations shaped by rank and honor. Yet Elisha did not come out to meet him. Instead, a quiet message was delivered, simple and unadorned. Naaman was instructed to go to the Jordan River and wash himself 7 times. The words carried no ceremony, no recognition of status, only a clear and gentle instruction. At first, the simplicity of it unsettled him. The Jordan appeared ordinary, its waters familiar and unremarkable. Naaman felt a stirring of resistance within, a quiet struggle between expectation and humility. He had imagined something different, something grand and visible. The calm instructions seemed almost too small for such a great need. His steps slowed, and his heart wrestled with the thought of obedience that required surrender rather than display. Those travelling with him spoke softly, their voices steady and respectful. They reminded him that if something difficult had been required, he would have done it without hesitation. How much more, then, could he respond to something simple? Their words settled gently, not as command but as invitation. Naaman paused, listening, allowing the weight of pride to loosen its hold. In that moment of stillness, he turned toward the river, choosing humility over expectation. The Jordan flowed calmly as he approached, its surface reflecting the sky in muted tones. Naaman stepped into the water, the cool current moving quietly around him. He lowered himself beneath the surface once, then again, each movement unhurried and deliberate. With every immersion, the river embraced him without distinction, treating him as any other soul standing within its flow. There were no sudden changes, no signs to mark the moment. Only the steady rhythm of obedience continued, guided by trust rather than sight. By the 7th time, as he rose from the water, something gentle had shifted. His skin was restored, smooth and whole, renewed in a way that carried no noise or announcement. Healing had arrived not through ritual or recognition, but through surrender and quiet faith. The river flowed on as it always had, unchanged in appearance, yet it had borne witness to a transformation shaped by humility and trust. Naaman stood still at the water's edge, breathing evenly, feeling the calm settle deeply within him. Gratitude moved through him without urgency, steady and sincere. He returned not with triumph, but with reverence, acknowledging that healing had come through simple obedience rather than power or display. The journey back was quieter, his steps lighter, his heart grounded in a peace that reached beyond the body. The land remained calm as the day continued. The river moved softly beside the path, its waters carrying the memory of obedience fulfilled. Healing had unfolded without spectacle, rooted in surrender and humility. In the gentle flow of ordinary moments, God's care had met a willing heart, restoring what had been burdened and leaving behind a quiet assurance that simple acts of trust can carry the deepest healing. The path led onward to a quiet place near the water, where tall trees leaned gently toward the river bank. Their leaves moved softly in the breeze, casting slow shifting patterns of light upon the ground. A small group of men worked nearby, building a simple dwelling with patient effort. Their movements were steady and unhurried, the sound of wood meeting wood blending with the calm murmur of flowing water. Each stroke of the axe was measured, a rhythm of honest labor carried out with quiet purpose. As one man lifted his axe for another careful swing, the iron head slipped loose from its handle. It fell swiftly, striking the surface of the river before sinking from sight. The splash was small, quickly absorbed by the steady flow of water. The man froze, his heart heavy with sudden loss. The axe head was borrowed, valuable, and now hidden beneath the surface, unreachable by his own strength. The river moved on, indifferent and calm, as though nothing had happened. He turned to Elisha with quiet distress, speaking softly of what had been lost. There was no urgency in his voice, only honest concern. Elisha listened without interruption, his attention steady and gentle. He walked with the man to the edge of the water and asked where it had fallen. The place was marked, not by anything visible, but by memory and trust. Elisha took a small piece of wood and cast it gently upon the surface of the river. The motion was simple, almost weightless, and the wood floated calmly where it landed. For a moment, nothing seemed to change. The water continued its steady movement, the reflections of sky and trees shifting slowly across its surface. Then, quietly and without disturbance, the iron axe head rose from beneath the water and floated beside the wood. There was no sound to announce it, no ripple to draw attention. It simply appeared, resting on the surface as though it had always belonged there. The man stepped forward slowly, his hand steady as he reached down and lifted the iron from the water. Relief moved through him softly, not as excitement but as calm gratitude. What had been lost was returned, not through effort or force, but through quiet trust and care. The river continued to flow, unchanged in its course. The trees swayed gently above, their reflections drifting across the water as before. The moment passed without interruption to the work at hand. The men returned to their task, their movements grounded once more in steady rhythm. In that simple place by the river, something small had been restored. The miracle carried no display, no lasting mark upon the land. Yet it lingered quietly in the heart, a reminder that nothing entrusted to God is too small to be seen, and nothing lost is beyond gentle care. The night settled gently over the hills, and the town lay wrapped in quiet shadows. Lamps glowed softly behind windows, and the air carried the calm of rest. Elisha and his servant rose early, stepping outside into the pale light of dawn. As the servant looked out across the surrounding hills, his breath caught. An army had gathered during the night, horses and chariots encircling the town in silent formation. The sight filled the valley, still and unmoving, a presence that felt heavy and close. The servant's heart tightened with fear, his thoughts racing in the hush of the morning. He turned to Elisha, his voice low, his concern plain. The world seemed suddenly small, hemmed in by forces too great to face. The quiet of the town pressed in, and the hills that had once felt protective now seemed to lean inward. Elisha remained calm. His posture was steady, his gaze gentle. He spoke softly, not to dismiss the fear, but to steady it. His words carried assurance rather than command, inviting trust to settle where fear had stirred. Then he prayed, quietly and simply, asking that his servant's eyes be opened. As the prayer faded into the still air, the servant looked again. The hills began to change, not in form but in fullness. Beyond the army that stood in plain sight, the slopes shimmered with a presence that had been there all along. Horses and chariots of fire filled the heights, surrounding the town with light that did not burn and strength that did not shout. The scene was vast and peaceful, ordered and calm, a silent guard that required no alarm. The servant's fear eased into wonder. He stood quietly, breathing evenly, taking in the protection that had never left. The visible threat remained, yet it no longer defined the moment. What could not be seen before now rested clearly around them, steady and sufficient. The morning light grew warmer. The town remained still. The unseen army held its place without movement or sound, and peace settled gently where fear had been. The quiet of the hills remained unbroken as the moment unfolded. The army that had surrounded the town stood unaware of what lay beyond their sight, their strength resting in numbers rather than understanding. Elisha stepped forward with calm purpose, his voice gentle as he spoke a prayer that carried neither anger nor fear. The words were simple, asking that their sight be clouded, not to harm them, but to still the threat that had arrived under cover of darkness. A soft confusion settled over the soldiers. Their vision faded into uncertainty, and the sharp edges of intention dulled into quiet disorientation. There was no cry of alarm, no clash of weapons. The stillness held. Elisha approached them without haste and spoke to them kindly, offering guidance as one might lead travelers who had lost their way. Trusting his calm authority, they followed, their steps measured, their movements subdued. He led them along the road toward Samaria, the journey unfolding beneath a steady sky. The land passed quietly at their sides, fields and paths familiar yet unseen by those who walked them. When they reached the city, Elisha prayed again, and their sight was restored. The soldiers found themselves within the walls of their enemy, surrounded not by fire, but by the quiet presence of those they had come against. The king of Israel looked upon them with readiness to strike, his question sharp with the possibility of victory. Elisha answered with restraint and compassion. He spoke calmly, urging mercy where fear might have ruled. These men were not to be harmed. Instead, they were to be given food and water, to be treated with care rather than violence. Tables were set, and bread was brought. Water was poured. The soldiers ate in silence, their hands steady, their expressions softened by the unexpected kindness offered to them. Hunger gave way to calm, and tension loosened its hold. No chains were placed upon them. No demands were made. They were fed, allowed to rest, and then sent back to their land. The gates opened quietly as they departed. Their steps were slower now, their hearts marked by an encounter that had replaced fear with mercy. The hills watched as they returned the way they had come, no longer bearing intent to harm. In the days that followed, the land grew still. Raids ceased, and the border rested. Peace settled gently, not forced by conquest, but invited by compassion. What strength could not secure, mercy achieved without struggle. The quiet triumph lingered in the air, a reminder that restraint guided by faith can disarm even the strongest opposition, and that peace can take root where fear once stood. The land grew quiet again, as it often does after mercy has passed through unseen. Fields rested under open sky, homes settled into evening stillness, and the soft rhythm of ordinary life returned. The paths Elisha had walked remained unchanged to the eye, yet they carried the memory of quiet wonders that had unfolded without noise or display. Waters had been healed, lives restored, hunger eased, danger softened, and fear replaced with calm, all through moments that passed gently and left peace behind. These works did not linger in loud retelling. They lived quietly in homes where oil no longer ran dry, near rivers that continued to flow without announcing what they had witnessed, and in hearts that had learned trust through simple obedience. Each miracle had moved like a slow breath, steady and faithful, touching what was needed and then receding into stillness. Nothing was rushed. Nothing demanded attention. Grace moved as it always does, present even when unseen. As night deepened, lamps glowed softly in windows, and the world eased into rest. The same God who guided Elisha continued to work beyond sight, tending to needs not spoken, shaping outcomes not yet understood. If there is another story you would like to rest with next, one that carries the same quiet depth and gentle truth, you may share which story you would like prepared. The path remains open, and the stillness continues to welcome every moment that follows.